blessed unity with the L-O-V-E. Love is a solution, so set your love free with the L-O-V-E. Further evolution and blessed unity.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Self-Love Show. I'm one of your hosts, Trish Wright, and this is my beautiful co-host, Dawn Lightamora. Yay, I'm so happy.
Good morning, everyone.
Happy Thursday. And we have an amazing guest on today, Miss Kimberly Lindsay. And let me just introduce the show and who you are. So, when we are conscious with our thinking, we can purposefully direct our thought energy. Give me just 1 second. I'm going to... There we go. When we are conscious with our thinking, we can purposely direct our thought energy, and then we can manifest life desire we want as a parent, partner, and person we want to be. Our thoughts make our life, and we have every ability to turn away from our self-sabotaging thoughts and patterns towards that which we desire and deserve. We do this by intercepting our saboteur voices, commanding our mind, and engaging our sage self. We get to break our own fake news and the saboteurs that speak into our head from the other people's parenting narratives, systems we lived by as a child, as children's kids, society's beliefs of the ideal life, and the stories we made up about ourselves or believed because someone else said they were true. Through mental fitness, which is our topic today, we can lead life from a more positive mindset than a negative mindset. We can live a dynamic life as the partner, parent, and person we want to be. When we are conscious with our thinking, we can consciously direct our thought energy, and we can manifest the life we desire. We're on this planet to live our best life. Born worthy, whole, and loved. Inside of you right now lives your true essence, which is always the whole and always available flow of unconditional love. So we get to join Kimberly today as she shares 3 core muscles of mental fitness and the power of the sage within. And I'm very excited to share Kimberly's bio. Kimberly Lindsay is a leadership coach and a mental fitness trainer to women, spiritual leaders, creatives, and moms. She works in interfaith ministry and is a home educating mom of 3. Her foundational training was with the world-renowned Coactive Training Institute. Her advanced training was with CRR Global in organization and relationship systems coaching. She's also a PQ coach with Positive Intelligence, and she's she's international board certified lactation consultant and retired Lamaze certified child birth educator. She holds a Bachelor of Arts from Southern New Hampshire University with a concentration in psychology and a focus on health and science. She's an ordained minister with Open Ministry, and her ministry is non-denominational and honors all paths that lead to spirit. After growing up in Southern Baptist Church, she went on to quest to learn more. She spent her adult life studying different spiritual paths, and while she identifies as Christian, she's initiated priestess, a Kabbalist, Reiki master, and a student of New Thought. You can find out more about her in the links that I shared during the show. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
That was a lot.
That was a lot. You know what I think about it when I was looking at your website, when I was kind of like, generally they're not that long, but when I was reading your website to understand what mental fitness is, I think it was important to share what that looked like and what your work is. I'm wondering if someone's running the show on another platform somewhere else in the background, maybe on Facebook, because I can hear the echo. All right.
I just closed it.
Thank you. Hi,
Thank
Scott.
you.
Hi, Slash. Welcome to today's show.
I just want to say thanks so much, Kimberly, for stepping forward and being on the show today. I really honor your work in the world, and I'm just so excited to share this journey with you here in this moment because we've been friends a long time. And, my husband has been friends with your husband a very long time, too. So it's just such a privilege to really, share this journey in this way as moms, first off, and as coaches in the world. Really want to celebrate your work and like homeschooling 3 children and being a mom and coach at the same time is just amazing. I just got to give you props for that. So we're super excited to dive in and hear about what mental fitness means and like how you've come to this understanding in yourself about mental fitness. Like it's really big. I heard in your languaging around your stuff is like laying down that saboteur, right? That from our parental narratives that we can pick up. And that's so big, and I really resonate with that so clearly because it's been the work I've done in the world too, of how to learn how to like, oh, that is not my voice. Like I can lay that down.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. What are stories you come to your parenting with that were actually someone else's narrative, right? And then the stuff that we make up on our own that we don't actually have to keep carrying.
So, for an example, I have some of those that I've been working with. Is recently I have a relationship that's very dear to me has transitioned into a friendship, and the common story is I'm not enough and they don't need me, or that I'm unlovable because of my experiences. And I know that those aren't true, because they're so hot, right? They're so emotional about it that it's not, I know that it's not the truth, right? So there's things that some of the stories around the questions, the unlovableness, the separation piece is really, I'm still getting that go, yeah?
Yeah, I can hear it.
Hold on, it's a little distracting. I wonder if it's me.
Well, I can honestly say, for me, I'm actively in the throes of dissolving like the languaging. I think that I picked up from witnessing my mom run a business when I was young, and now I'm in that place in my life where I'm running a business, and my child is the age that my mom was, and all. I'm really deeply dissolving that curriculum as we speak right now. Around what it's like to be an entrepreneur and a mom, and that I can do both very well.
Yeah.
Right. And that it's not in sacrifice of that one sacrifices for the other or vice versa. Right. That I can actually be a loving, amazing, show up full-time mom and show up full-time in my business as well. And it's like, it's so good that I'm in the portal of dissolving this stuff right as we speak. So I'm so thankful you're on the show to talk about this and give voice to like for all the women out there that have businesses and are mothers. Like this is so powerful, right? To support ourselves in like learning to lay down the curriculum that isn't serving ourself any longer.
Right. Yes. I have so many thoughts in my head, and one of them is to clarify, is it me that has a sound issue going on? I just want to make sure we're good with that. I hear it too, but I don't know.
Well, it would be someone would be running the show either in the background, like on live.
Oh.
Yeah, it is still here. Is it me?
All my windows are closed, just so you know.
I don't have anything running other video. Is anyone running it on their phone, maybe?
I don't have it.
Okay. All right. No worries. We'll just work it out. Sorry, everyone.
I feel our spirit reverberating everything we say.
Well, how do you tell what? I mean, we can start here. How do you tell what is a story that's running from someone else? So, like, here's an example. a childhood story that I realized that the thing that I learned as a child was I'm alone. And after, I think I've shared this on the show before, is that when I'm like, I was sitting here with all these people and I'm alone. And I'm like, oh, shit, that's so weird. I'm not alone. And then I was talking to my mom and she's like, I'm always alone. And I was like, huh, I wonder what's there. So then I reached out to an auntie and was like, hey, do you have this story? And did grandma have it? Did she say this all the time? And she's like, yeah, she felt alone all the time. And she's told me some stories and we don't know past that. So it occurred to me at that moment that I was like, oh, that's not my story. I'm alone is a familial pattern that was passed down. It was a family like heirloom. They're like, here, you take I'm alone. And it's not like she ever sat and was like, Trish Wright, you are alone in the world. It doesn't come out like that. It comes out in subtle ways of thinking, the way that you behave, the way that you share your thoughts and your worries and with your children. It was indoctrinated. I took it on like I'm alone. And then I created part of it like I'm alone and I'm an only child, which is like an extra layer of aloneness. Whatever. I had a great childhood and I had a very vivid fantasy and imagination experience. Like it was massive and it was fun. So at that point, I was like, I don't need to participate anymore. There's that. That's a story that runs that you actually have to practice getting out of. And that's why it's so exciting to hear about your work and how else it shows up in the world. How else do you know that other stories and other things are running?
Yeah. I watched, I don't remember who it was with, but I watched the show that you talked about that. And there are so many. There's one that I was coming up with and I thought, wait, why is this in my head? Oh, because society put it there. Society said women are going to deal with these things. Women are more likely to deal with these things. And from the time I was a child, so that was in my head. This is what happens. This is just, you should just expect it because you're a girl, you're going to deal with it. And it's like, well, do I want to deal with that? There's a choice that I can also play in that too, right? I don't have to take it on. I don't have to own it. And so much of that comes down to that, like in the mental fitness language, right? Because there's so many different aspects you can look at that, right? And for me, in my work, mental fitness and spirituality really merge and converge there. But like, what's that underlying resonant feeling with that, right? If there's any of that, like, with the I'm alone story, sometimes alone feels really great, right? You're like, oh, okay, yes, I'm alone. This is really good, right? Okay, so that's coming from that positive place, that divine place or that sage place, right? But if it's got that underlining angst, heaviness, weight, if it's pulling us through like anxiety and guilt, right? That's all that negative reinforcement stuff, right? So in the land of the positive intelligence view on mental fitness, that would be those saboteur stories, right?
Yes.
And if we're not aware of them, they're leading our life. It's like we're in the passenger seat, and our saboteurs are driving the bus, right? And so they're driving how we show up as a parent, as a partner, as a friend, as a co-leader, and just how we person. Yeah. And as a parent, it's so important to me, in my view, to be really clear on that because, okay, well, now I have a responsibility because I'm raising these 3 people and I've got them, what story, I don't want to add stories to their life that are unhealthy. I don't want them to take on my stuff that I'm dealing with. So how do I want to show up for them so I can feel really good in my parenting role and I'm modeling healthy living for them, right? Yeah.
So how does that look for you? Tell us more about that. I want to know more about what that means for you and how does the mental fitness weave in for you in that dynamic?
So I've always been pretty, well, let's see. When I was young, when I was little, and I'm sure my mom is going to see this, and I've apologized about this before, but I'm sure she'll watch this. But I had said, I grew up Baptist, and I'd said, well, yeah, I don't believe in reincarnation, because Baptists don't. But my reason for not believing in reincarnation was because, quote, I hated my childhood so much, God wouldn't make me do it again. And so I've had this dance with, well, what is it about my childhood I didn't like? And how do I not do that for my kids? Right? How do I provide them something different, show them something different, and heal my stuff? So I've always had this sort of awareness kind of around that, which kind of can be heavy, right? Because then you put a lot of pressure on yourself, right? Like,
Yes.
screw this up. I can't screw this up, right? Then that's almost too much weight to bear too, right? The mental fitness language came in because it really clarified for me. In the positive intelligence world, they've done factor analysis to say, here are 10 saboteurs. We all do these 10 things, right? We all are led by what they call our master saboteur, our judge. We judge ourselves, we judge others, and we judge circumstance. Some people are like, no, I don't judge myself. But really, we do, right? And then that saboteur gets accomplice saboteurs, and they kind of, piggyback into our lives. And those are the voices that blame us, shame us, push us through negative reinforcement, right? And we know as a parent, we don't want to raise our kids through negative reinforcement, right? It's all about positive reinforcement, right? So why do we do it to ourselves?
Exactly.
But
Very good question.
Right? Oh, dang it. I didn't do good enough. I screwed that up. I was mad and I yelled at my kids, but or whatever, right? I suck at parenting today. I shouldn't be a parent at all. I just should stop, right? Whatever it is. We see, one failed attempt at something, a second failed attempt, and then we make up, well, I should just stop. I'll never get it, right? So we are our own worst enemy.
Yeah.
Right.
I'd like to piggyback for a second, if that's okay.
Yeah.
If someone says, I don't judge myself, or that it's likely that if you ever have judgments on another person,
Yeah.
that those are judgments you hold on yourself. Likely many, many, many times harsher than you judge others.
Yeah.
So I've said this many, many times in many, many shows, and I'll say it again because I love this. It's like a spiritual principle, psychology principle, but how we relate to the issue is the issue.
Yeah.
Right? And so there it is. Like if we're judging someone else, it's the judgment we hold against ourselves, and that judgment is the issue.
Yes. So if we're sitting there thinking about like, oh, that person's whatever it is, it's the places of discomfort in ourselves that we're not willing to meet yet, right?
Yes.
So if I'm a bad parent because I yelled at my kids, what's the value and what's the thing that you hold? What's the belief that you hold about? Or if you see someone in the grocery store and their kid's fucking like having a meltdown. I mean, how do you control another human being? Like you can't. Yeah. I mean, people try to do it through abusive behaviors and manipulation and resentment and guilting and shaming and all of the things that we do to negatively reinforce behaviors, which I hate to break it to you all, but those things keep you from moving forward and keep you stuck in the same patterning. Negative reinforcement, psychologically and research tested, keeps you doing the same things because, again, your brain gets addicted to chemistry, regardless of whatever it is. So it just keeps doing that. If you want to positively reinforce it, if you want to like change it, positive reinforcement, but also empathy is really helpful to drop the heat and make a new pattern. Anyway, if you want to know where to look of what to do with your mental fitness or where to start, right there. If you have a judgment on someone else, look at how you keep that inside of you. Look at where you judge you for that. Because you probably do those behaviors or are so afraid to be human in that behavior as well. Okay.
Well, and you're exactly, I mean, all that is exactly right. So in mental fitness, we have our saboteurs. We don't, they layer, right? Like there's going to be a little bit of judge and there's a little bit of maybe victim in this story. And maybe I'm a little bit of my restless in this story, right? And how we get through that is there's a whole little technique, which we'll get to, but you do speak to one of the beautiful powers of our sage self. And I also, in my work, this is our divine self. This is our godly self, which is empathy. Right? And a lot of people have trouble with being empathetic to themselves.
Yes.
That's exactly why I do the work that I do. And how did I Dawn? Oh, shoot. Dawn does the work she does.
Yes.
Yeah.
Truly why I'm a self-love coach. Because it's the heart of it, right? It's our relationship with ourself.
Yeah.
To be really honest, Kimberly, we just met this morning, right? But to be really honest, many, many years ago, I was a relationship coach for a company called Relationship Hero. And I ended up kind of getting a lot of talking tos because I wasn't empathetic enough. I couldn't connect. And it was true. At the moment, it was very, very true. And what occurred to me, I had to step into Love Coach Academy. As you all know, that this show is part of Love, was a muse. The Love Coach Academy was the muse for this show on really diving into empathy, self-empathy, and really being able to drop from the thoughts to the feelings, to the emotion, or to the wants and needs, and to really get clear why I was doing what I was doing, and just to be able to accept myself and my humanity there. It took me years to even get to that moment. And you know what has happened? Y'all watching, here's the cool thing that happens when you start to empathize with yourself, is that you expand your capacity to be with other people.
Yes.
Expands your capacity to be compassionate and empathetic to other people. What you can do within you, the microcosm, you can do within the macrocosm.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, I'm going to piggyback off of what you're saying right now. And most importantly, how to be empathetic with yourself and the most challenging relationships you have in your life, because they're the sacred mirror for your learning, right? So it's learning to be in compassion with self and empathy with self, even in the most challenging relationships. That's it. When you can drop into that space in the moment with those relationships that are mirrors, where it's sticky, icky, difficult, challenging, that's it.
Yeah.
Randy asks, how does that expand your ability to be with others? And I'd love to just pass it around, but I do have a quick answer for this. So in this understanding of who I am, as me as a person, right? That I have the capacity to do everything that anybody else is. I'm going to say some really bold statements right now. I have the capacity to be a very heinous, awful person. I have capabilities to murder others. I have capabilities to hurt other people. I have capabilities to actually behave in ways through adrenaline and cortisol that you'd probably be surprised about, right? I would be surprised about, because it's not part of my belief system. That's a judgment. Do you hear the judgment there? If I hurt an animal, a child, my lover, my loves, in any emotional, physical capacity, I would be so distraught. I would just be like, why would I do that? Now, if I can sit there and just be like, okay, I had a human reaction based on a chemistry and a whole lot of past stuff, if I can just be like, okay, I see you're angry, and I see that what you wanted was to be heard, to be seen, to be safe. You wanted connection, and that connection was lost in some way. And that created this upset. This created this expression. And I can see how painful it is inside of me. Like, oh, and give myself the credit for being human, to be there with me, to not abandon myself in my own humanness. And because that's the thing, is like, I'm not going to be, Trish all the time. I'm going to have anger. I'm going to have sadness. I'm going to have these things. And if I can hold myself there, if I can accept the core of it here, that when I see someone I love, who's probably going to be human too, ew, get it off, humans. It's so, they're also going to be human, right?
Yeah.
That if I can see my own humanity, that I can say like, oh, Dawn, I see you in your humanity. I see that you have frustrations and upsets. That I no longer look at an upset from my auntie or my mom or my dad or my friends. That I no longer make them bad and wrong for being human. That I'm like, oh, I know the feeling of anger. And I wanted connection then. What do you think they wanted? Oh, they wanted to be heard, and they don't feel heard from me.
And beyond that, you let go of showing up and supporting the victim story in that person's life. You can hold in the space of deep compassion, knowing it's a pattern playing out for them, right? And knowing you can listen to their story, support them in the loving, right? Hold in the loving for them, no matter what their ego, personality, emotions, because we're not any of those. We're human, yes, but we're spiritual beings having a human experience, and we're beyond our emotions, our body, our mind, all of it. So it's learning to be detached, learning to be a neutral observer of whatever is going on in your world. And that's where you can really identify, wow, what are the stories that are playing out? What are the judgments that are playing out in this? And you can hold for yourself and others and heal in the moment by allowing yourself to have self-forgiveness in that moment for whatever challenge is arising. What am I holding on to that needs self-forgiveness here while I'm witnessing this in this other person or myself, right? Like, powerful.
And I love.
Go ahead.
Well, and you're both stating the difference between judging something, self, or these other people and their stories, and discerning.
Yes.
Yes.
And there's such a quality difference, right? Like, that judging thing is, oh, I should have, I should have done this, and these are all the things, or they should be doing this, or they shouldn't do that, and then discerning, which is, okay, that happened. Okay, I got mad. Yes, I did that. Or yes, I see that, Whereas the judgment is all that saboteur junk. Those, which is a lot of drama and chaos and lies and that sort of stuff. And then discerning, because it's not about overlooking or sugarcoating or bypassing. You want to see it, right? This is what is. But you can say, this is what is, this is what I'm feeling, this is what's happening, this is what was said from a discerning sage place. Because that's where the shift is going to happen. That's where the positive shift is going to happen.
Yes.
And the release and the growth and from that place.
Yes.
Acknowledgement.
Yeah.
Acknowledging what is. You can't shift it unless you acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And if you shame it or judge it, then it just gets stuck.
Yeah. And or it just amplifies it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It continues the pattern.
Yeah. It's like, I'm just going to sit here until and just be mucky and muddy, or I'm going to get really big and in your face.
I think that it's important right now to pinpoint something, like to put it to the wall, is that being empathetic or understanding or acknowledging something doesn't make behaviors, actions, or thoughts right. There is no right and wrong here, but we're not promoting abuse, and we're not promoting, violence or anything like that. Like, those actions are not like good for cultivating human connection or safety or the things that there's values there. I'm not saying that. It's that I can sit with, or you can sit with how it can amplify to a point where someone can hurt another person. Like, physically, like how that actually happens, or emotionally. And it's all driven by needs wanting to be met, right?
Mm-hmm.
All driven by them.
Mm-hmm.
So, take it away, Kimberly.
Mm-hmm.
I heard that right there, and I was like, oh, I really want to make sure that it's not like we're condoning any behaviors that are harmful to other humans. Like, I don't want to do that.
Oh, yes. Yeah, definitely. And you do speak to that. It is with that. Those negative voices in our head, which in this language we'll call saboteurs. Some people will, you can call your judge your inner critic or your gremlin or your, all those other words for it, right? Again, they're in some ways trying to get your needs met as well, but it's how, right? By beating you on the head, or, nail, let's take away from that, nail on the hammer, or do you want to have like a paintbrush? You know what I mean? We can meet those same needs with completely different energy. And then it's more sustainable when we're living life from a more positive mindset. And here, let me also qualify something. I do not believe in it's not about ignoring stuff. It's not about the fluffy bunny stuff. It's not about, if I just think this stuff enough, it'll happen. Like you can't put an affirmation on the wall that says, I'm really happy, and go, I'm really happy, I'm really happy, I'm really happy, right? Like, some people say, well, I think abundant thoughts, how come I don't ever become abundant, right? Because it's got to go deeper then, right? It's not just saying the things, you got to do the work. You got to get underneath. You've got to, and what mental fitness does with the positive intelligence program is it literally is beyond insight. It's a visceral program that helps you rewire and create new neural pathways.
Yes.
Like we were saying earlier about the chemistry in the brain, right? So we have kind of our golden pathway in our brain of what's going to happen. Something happens, somebody says something, it's the pattern that we're used to hearing or the behaviors we're used to doing in a day. We get to what I call like the event and the golden pathway of our automatic response, right?
Yes.
Because those are the neural pathways, right? But what we can do when we start to feel triggered, we start to feel hijacked, right? We start to get angry, or we have the pounding in our chest, or we start to, whatever those physical nuances that we start to notice, if we pause right there and we literally shift our brain activation, we can create new neural pathways.
Yes.
Yes.
And eventually that golden highway will become the dirt road.
It takes a little practice. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. But it is incredibly worth it, because when we can raise our because like you're talking about human, right? It's never going to be perfect, right? Because we're human. We're all human, right? And we're doing this thing. And so we're still going to get triggered. We're still going to get hijacked. But when we can get hijacked less often, because we can go, oh, I know what that is. I used to feel really victimized by that story, or I used to feel so I tend to be pretty hyper vigilant. That would be one of my main saboteurs. It's okay to be vigilant though, right?
Yes.
Vigilance is good, right? But when I get overused, overexhausted, overtired, my hypervigilance starts in. And that sucks. It's heavy. It makes me mental. It makes me anxious. It gives me anxiety. It gives me panic attacks, right? So when I start to notice that hypervigilance come on, and I can quiet that saboteur mind, then I can swing back into the sage aspect of vigilance. And then when I can just raise my baseline just all over, I get hijacked less often.
Right.
Yeah. It's really beautiful what you're saying, because it's learning to, because the ego wants to identify in black and white, right? And like right, wrong, black and white, and that's where the judgment comes in. But unconditional love is beyond the ego. It's beyond the mind. It's beyond our emotions, right? And so it's learning to tap back into that frequency of unconditional love and be in the loving and unconditional love inside of ourselves while we're witnessing the pattern go on. And it's learning to kind of lean back into the neutral observation of what's going on in your life so that you can disengage and see all sides of the pattern, because the pattern is playing out in a spectrum. Like, you know, on one end, it's, you know, the light spectrum is over here, and on the other end, it's playing out in the shadow spectrum. And it's literally a pattern unfolding in both ways, in the angle of the whole spectrum. So you're able to start to see the pattern in a new way, when you can lean back in instead of having that triggered response, right? Because you want to, like, when you're triggered, you want to immediately respond, and that's the moment, right? That's where the power is when you lean back into neutral observation inside of yourself in those moments where you would be showing up in a triggered response. You could say, oh, wow, this is where I normally get really triggered, but I'm going to breathe here. What is the feelings arising? What's going on? Like, notice and start to ask yourself, where am I identifying with this? What do I make this mean about me?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. Yeah.
What do I make this whole scenario mean about me? That's it. When you can lean into that, it can dissolve everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So I like this idea of think, feel, pause, choose. So we're going to have our thoughts. And during 2020, I had to be confronted with a lot of my hypervigilant thoughts. And I would go to my husband, I'm like, am I being hypervigilant? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, let me come back down to vigilance. And he's, he'll, volley that back and forth with me. Maybe that's still a little hypervigilant. But you have thoughts, whatever they are, and then you have the feelings and pause. And I'll talk about what we call PQ reps in the land of positive intelligence here, and what to do in that pause and how to switch your brain activation, and then choose.
Yes.
Right? Because we can pause and go, are these negative feelings? Okay, switch brain activation. Or if they're positive, just keep going, right? But we do get to choose. But what you were saying, Trish, is you have to practice that if you're used to that golden highway of the triggered response.
Yeah. People are running thought processes. Well, I mean, if we want to get really, like, boil it all down, thoughts are chemicals, chemistry in your brain. And they're just, we become addicted to certain chemicals that we run all the time. And we've been running certain chemicals or neuropathways since potentially like before we're verbal. So as we learn to see the world through our parents and our little small communities' language, then we start to think in these chemicals, aka happy, sad, whatever feeling it is. Mm-hmm. And gosh, actually I just got distracted by a thought that it just like ran through my brain. And I do want to say this too, so I'm sorry I'm taking it a little direction, that a lot of people stay in victim, which is a very specific chemistry because it holds a lot of power and control. That what do you do with the victim? You give them a lot of attention and time and control and power because they have that. And so a lot of people, if they find that in their empowerment can't get that attention, that they often spin it, right? Does that make sense? But you can get out of the victim triangle or the codependent triangle by doing exactly what you said, Kimberly, is like acknowledging the thoughts, dropping into the feelings, and pausing.
Yeah.
Where are you coming from here?
Yeah.
How do you want to respond rather than react?
Yeah. And I like this question that goes with it, which we can do with anything, is how is this serving me?
Yes.
Like sometimes with being sick, people get sick a lot, seasonally, or women who end up in bed each, moon cycle, end up in bed, their cramps are really bad. And how is that serving you? Oh, because I realize that when I'm sick or I'm unwell or I'm cramping, I get to take a break. And that's when I get me time. And I sit in my bed for 2 days and I watch TV and I read, and my partner takes care of the kids. right? So is there a way to meet that need for rest and restoration and healing and self-care without having to get sick or be crampy? Because sometimes we attach those somatic body feelings to things that they aren't really attached to, right? And then we can change it. Oh, okay, maybe I don't cramp as much as I, was leaning into.
Exactly. I'd love to hear about how to become mentally fit.
Okay.
Put you on the spot now.
Yes, you did. Well, okay. My do you have a more specific question? I want to make sure that I gear it towards something that's relevant.
More like I'm inviting you to share exactly what you want to share with us, maybe the process or tool or something that, because we've talked a little bit about why we do mental fitness, and we're getting more into how we would do mental fitness. Like, okay, so I know that, I run a bunch of stories and they're limiting me from being my highest potential.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to have peace of mind. I want to be, like I have these things that I want, and I can start to see that my perspective is holding me back. And I would love to spotlight you and give you the floor to take us through your work.
Wonderful. Yes. Thank you. So to be transparent, one of my saboteur voices is my Stickler, and my Stickler likes to get everything right. And I will overthink and I will overprocess. And I sometimes, if there's a goal or a dream or something I want to write or do or create, I won't do it because there's just no way it's going to be perfect. So I start.
Yes.
Right. So one reason I asked about this and being specific was to just sort of, tell the Stickler voice, Sage has this, right? And to calm that story in that voice. So we have 10 saboteurs, or Judge Saboteur. Oh, hello. Y'all went away. I was talking to your pretty faces.
Because I want to give you the spotlight. Like that's the...
Okay, that's fine. I was just talking to you. That's okay. I'll talk to myself. So we have the avoider, control. Now, see, we don't all live in all of these all the time. But these are the 10 saboteurs through factor analysis that run our stories and run lives. So again, you may be resonate more with 2 or 3 of these than the other ones, and sometimes over a layer in our life. But avoider, controller, hyperachiever, hyper-rational, hyper-vigilant, pleaser, restless, victim, stickler, and our judge. Our saboteurs will push us through life. They push through negative reinforcement. They are the things that have us feel heavy, who pull us down, who their stories are blame and guilt and I can't do this, right? They have discontentment throughout them. But these are not the real you. These are not the essence of you, because we are born whole, we are born worthy, loved, and we get to access that all the time. Our saboteurs live on our left side of our brain. They are activated and triggered. Those voices are activated and triggered on our left side of our brain, our survival brain. And when we start to feel overtired, when these voices are feeling abused and overused, they will start to come on. And when I speak to parents, and because I am a home educating mom of 3, I'll lean into that. It can be tiring to run a business, to home educate 3 children. And when I'm not taking care of me and I see all the things that aren't getting done, it's really easy for me to feel like I can't do it all. Maybe I'm not showing up for the kids. Maybe I'm failing my husband because my business isn't making enough money. None of those stories are going to give me the life that I desire and deserve, right? Those are false stories. There may be discerning truths in them that I can shift, but they are not going to lead my life and grow my life in the positive ways. So what do you do? The program that I have through Positive Intelligence is a 6-week program, and it leads you through a very visceral, activating way to change those negative neural pathways in your mind, to drop from the story of negative reinforcement and activate that sage, that wise, that knowing mind that lives in the right side of your brain. So we're going to do what we call PQ reps. And how we quiet those saboteur voices is to weaken them. And we weaken them by intercepting them every single time we feel them. Okay. So if I hope you're okay, Dawn. If I start to feel hijacked, or I start to feel restless, or I start to feel like I'm doing things for other people, like say I'm a pleaser, like I ignore my own desires and I ignore my own needs because I'm pleasing somebody else and showing up for them. Okay. So we can weaken that voice. And we're going to start by doing what's called a PQ rep, right? This is how we weaken that voice every time. We intercept it, we intercept its story, we intercept its dialogue into our head, and we weaken it. And we call this a PQ rep. So I'll just lead you through it just real quick. You can do this at 10 seconds at a time, or you can take this into a full meditation if you wanted. But a PQ rep is very similar to any other somatic body connection. And it's where you put exquisite attention on any body sensation. And they've shown in MRI technology that doing this for 6 to 8 weeks actually decreases the gray matter on the left survival side of your brain, and it increases the gray matter in our right side of the brain. And this is where we make our wise choices from. This is where we lead and grow our life from, where we get positive reinforcement, like love and compassion and empathy and creativity. So I'll just have you drop into your body here for a minute. My favorite PQ rep is rubbing my 2 fingertips together. So with such attention and detail that you can feel the ridges of your fingertips. Now take one hand and move your fingertips down the palm of the other hand, feeling how gentle that is. Maybe it tingles, but really feel the sensations. Now wiggle your toes, each toe, wiggle each toe. Now put your attention on your breath. Hear the air going in your nostrils and hear the air going out your mouth. Now that's maybe the closest sound you hear. What's the furthest away sound that you hear? Now, if your eyes are closed, open your eyes and look at an object with gentle focus that's near you. And maybe put your attention back on your breath for a minute. There are many somatic reps that you can do with any of your senses. Kids are really good at this too. A lot of times they live more connected to their body's sensations than we do as adults sometimes. But it's really beautiful to get them consciously aware of their body sensations and teaching them how to move out of that fight and flight, that worry, that anxiety, that mental chaos, and into a less triggered, calming, knowing brain activation of the right side of the brain. This is a beautiful tool where we can preempt our saboteurs as well. If we know that sitting down to do homework with our children gets us often anxious, maybe we're not great at math and we have to do math homework with our kids and it gets us anxious, we can go ahead and quiet that left side of the brain that gets worked up and antsy before we sit down with our kids. And we can do one of these reps. We can have our kids do these before they sit down to do their homework. We can print those saboteurs with reps like this before business calls, before business meetings, if you have a business meeting. And one of the great things about this is that if you're on a Zoom call or if you are giving a talk like this and maybe nervous, people don't know if you're doing this underneath the desk. So you can be working on switching your brain activation and people do not even have to know. Then we do this and we intercept and we weaken that saboteur. And this is what I call engaging the sage, or what I also call the divine cycle, because this calls upon our divine being in full presence, that being of us that we are never without, that is always with us, but it brings it forward and alive with us. And we learn to command our mind. There's a saying that when we command our mind, we command our life, right? And either the thoughts in our head are running our story in a positive way or a negative way, but we have every capacity to lead our life with the emotions, the thoughts, and the energies that we want. And it doesn't mean it's going to be perfect, right? Because we are human. So not every moment's going to be peachy and, but we can raise our baseline where we start to feel content more often, more frequently. So when we get triggered, we don't go down the spiral as far, or we don't stay there as long. When we get triggered and we go, okay, you know what? I know what this is. And I can turn from this. I can turn from those thoughts that I don't want, and I can start engaging the thoughts that I do want. And it's a dance. Sometimes it's a dance. It's not an automatic, I did a somatic body experience. I changed my brain activation once, like I'm done. I mean, maybe it is, depending on the situation, but it's a dance. When that feeling comes up again, you go, I know what this is. I got it. I'm going to choose again. I know what this is. I got it. I'm going to choose again. And you start to change, like as Trish was saying, the chemistry in your brain, the neural pathways in your brain, and you create a new habitual response. It is completely possible to change old habituated responses to new ones. Our sage being has access to everything that we need and desire. We can play with the sage power of explore. We talked about empathy earlier. Explore, where we get really curious. Well, what is happening here? We ask questions where we say, it's kind of like turning over a rock. Okay, what's here? Let me learn more about this. Maybe why am I feeling this? We can innovate. I like to play a game called the yes and game. I learned this years ago in improv. Yes, and this is also happening. Yes, I'm feeling this, and maybe this is showing up for this. Yes, and the sage power of navigate, where we can flash forward and say, what's important about this for me to know? And activate, where we can learn to preempt our saboteurs and also move forward with that which we want. So we have the saboteurs, we have our sage wisdom, the sage perspective that anything can be turned into a gift and an opportunity. Maybe that gift and opportunity we don't know right now in the moment, but there's always learning that we can take forward, right? We don't have to repeat cycles of, I have in the past repeated a lot of stories where I beat myself up over and over and over again for the same thing, right? Well, that's my judge. And I don't need to do that, right? That doesn't empower my life at all. So how do I stop beating myself up over the same story? What's in it that I can use? And what's in it that I should just let go? So the coaching program that I have, that I offer, is individual one-on-one coaching. And in the middle of that is this 6-week program where you spend 1 hour a week on a video learning all about these saboteurs and activating your sage and how to turn away from those saboteurs. And it's an app guided program. So you have 1 hour a week of a video lesson and 15 minutes a day, broken up into coach challenges where you get to explore a new teachings and new tools each day for 6 weeks, because we are living and we're breathing and we're walking through the world each day. Our saboteurs don't have, like a clock they punch. They don't just happen in the morning or happen at night. And so the more that we do this and we work with it throughout the day, we start to learn where those voices are and how they show up in our life. So the program has 15 minutes broken up throughout the day. You have a coach challenge in the morning and then 3 times throughout the day. So you get to really work on those and you learn really cool things in that. And we can talk about all that, what that is later. But I will leave you with this. You were born to live a beautiful, wonderful life. And you can live a beautiful and wonderful life. And I hope the best for you. We get a turn from our old stories and old conditions. We don't have to live them. We don't have to live other people's stories of our life. We don't have to live the media and society stories of our life. We get to decide what we want and we get to go make it happen.
Yes. Live your best life. Yes, yes, yes.
I love the pattern interrupt work. It's fabulous, Kimberly. Like wow. We don't it really is. It's true is that you have the power to interrupt your secular thoughts.
Yeah.
And to be able to look at the saboteurs, the things that you're running unconsciously, stories that are young and painful, mostly from belonging, like the the things that I was saying at the beginning of the show is like these running stories of insecurities, which are all very common and very human. You get to look at those and you get to pattern interrupt them. You're not serving your highest, most beneficial purpose in the planet, in this world, and in your life, and for your family, and for yourself, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And just the embodiment piece. Peace. You're brilliant.
I didn't make it all up, but I've integrated all of my years of my study into how I deliver it. But what you said is interesting also, because some people will argue this and go, well, I have a hyperachiever and I've achieved so much in my life with my hyperachiever. Why do I not want it? Right?
Yes.
I have achieved some. Okay, well, what if you could be just as achieving without that stress the hyperachiever puts on you, right? Because are you achieving by being bulldozed over? Or are you achieving by, growing like this, right? A subtle difference, but it seems subtle, but it's really not. It's really quite powerful.
I've been asking myself a question lately of why, and why am I trying to achieve all these things, and who's it for?
Yeah.
Is it an authentic desire and delight inside of me, or is it to participate in a sense of belonging? We were talking about this before the show. Is like, is it for me, or is it for society? Is it for power? Is it for a look? And is it like, why am I doing these things? Am I choosing to go to whatever prestigious school for the power and the attention of that, or am I doing it because it's something derivative? It's really delighting me.
Yeah.
And if we take the thing out of I have to achieve for worth, what does achievement look like, or what does success look like? And Dawn and I have done a couple shows on this before, and really, early on in 2020 is like really checking ourselves of like, what does achievement and success look like when it's coming from the authentic spiritual love, self-loved state, rather than to belong or to create community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My brain is somewhere today.
It's right here. And what does it feel like, right? Like what?
It feels like the truth.
Yeah.
It feels alive. It feels that you have that it feels inspired. I've said inspired living is inspired loving, and in living from moving from inspiration rather than obligation is a very, very different energy. So the saboteurs, or the the negative or the overachiever, the hyper people, like those, like really looking at what that wants. What is that wanting? What is it desperately seeking to be so aggressive in the world? Because that's where it's coming from, right? I'm really loving the piece of slowing down and making friends with your saboteurs, because that's so it's crucial to moving forward. It's crucial for happy, healthy lives and acceptance and self-love and compassion and empathy and all the things.
They're asking to be integrated in a healthy way.
Yeah. In case the beautiful man who came up with positive intelligence, his name is Shirzad Chambain, is listening, that ever happened, he would be very clear to say in his land that our saboteurs are not our friends. And so what's that dance with that, right? Because we don't want to alienate part of ourselves, because that causes, I know this is languaging, but that causes a separation, right? Like that part of me is worthy and whole too, right? There's a message, right? There's a message, there's a job where we get to go, okay, I got it. I hear. You showed up because there's something I need to know or to see to alarm me, right?
Yes.
But as soon as we cuddle them up and go, in this method of this, if we cuddle them up and go, oh, you're my friend, right? Then are we turning from it and moving from it? This is an interesting dance.
I'm definitely a slightly more in the realm of thought of parts therapy. So Gestalt and integration of the parts rather than moving away from or towards something, of integrating that piece. Because I know that my saboteurs or my negative thoughts or my insecurities are coming from places of deep wants and needs. So
Yeah.
at the beginning, I shared that I could run this story of nobody will love me or I'm not worthy or whatever. And what is it actually saying? What's the thing there? And the thing there is that I want connection.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be heard and I want to be seen and accepted for all of me.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what that whatever saboteur, which is generally a childhood fear or some young part that's coming forward. And so it's like, oh, can I see that? And can I say, oh, yeah, I can see that my insecurity here is part of me and it's telling me that I need connection or safety. And how can I source that for myself right now?
Yeah.
And instead of being like, oh, no, I'm not going to feel the insecurity of that. Like, I don't want that because I've done that. I've done the positive thinking thing where it was spiritually bypassing for me to do. It's all good. And if I just think positive thoughts and say my affirmations, it'll like, I'll just be perfect. And that was really bypassing to what was actually running and what was needing to be seen, heard, and worked with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my approach, is really gestalty piece of bringing parts together and integrating them. I'm not going to be like, oh, my insecurity walking down the road with me, and I'm just not going to like let that person or that thing keep poisoning the well of my life.
I really see it from a spiritual psychology standpoint, which is, when I mean integrating, I mean bringing forward the pattern, right? Because the saboteur is whatever saboteur is coming forward, if it's the overachiever or whichever piece, right, that's coming forward in that pattern, it's coming forward for a reason, because there's a spiritual lesson in it, right? An opportunity. There's an opportunity for you to see from the higher self, the authentic self, in a new way, a part of your life that needs to be integrated. There's a lesson there. So when I see it from a spiritual psychology standpoint, I'm looking at the saboteur to bring it closer, to make friends with it, to understand it, and see what is underneath it's asking, right? There's a part of me in that. And so it's really bringing it home to the heart of love to dissolve the patterning, right? Through forgiveness, through understanding, through completing the pattern by dissolving it.
Yes.
Right? It only dissolve the pattern through unconditional loving of all parts of itself. That way the pattern dissolves, and you then can identify and see, oh gosh, that's a piece of my mother there and a piece of my father, and I see how this whole pattern is playing out because it's both of them and it's integrated in me. I picked up my mother's feelings around this, and my father showed me how to play it out.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's a deeply interwoven pattern. And so from a spiritual psychology standpoint, you learn to be a spiritual scientist and look at your life through the lens of a spiritual scientist and be curious, what is that? So when I say be friends with the saboteur, it's to get to know it on a very deep, intimate level so that you can learn to dissolve all the parts that are not the authentic self.
I love what you were saying. I was really, God, I love what Kimberly and Dawn are saying here. Of really, maybe you don't have to use the word friend. Use the language that you want to use in your transformation, because I think that's the language that we use is very individual to each person, because we have 7.8 billion different realities on this planet, and some of our words mean different things to other people. And what I love about the work is that none of us are choosing to make the saboteurs or the stories or the past patterning a way of being or a way of life.
Yeah.
And that's also a very key point. Like, I'm not going to let my insecurities run my show, but I know that everyone has insecurities.
Mm-hmm.
I know that everyone's human and has that capacity to have pain and suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, what works for me to dissolve or to integrate those things is my definition of love.
Mm-hmm.
Unconditional or radical acceptance of what is. Love now looks like radical acceptance of what is. That's what love looks like to me. And it's just being in that place of like, oh, and I love that part.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in it. Let's go.
Yeah.
And having the tools to acknowledge that it's a saboteur. Oh, yeah. That's a thing. And you know what I can do is I can drop into the embodied state. I can be here. Fall into or fall back into a safety net of the embodied places, Kimberly, where you're sharing is like these amazing tools to check back into the present moment.
Yeah.
And to get out of your fight or flight, your reptilian brain, and back in to your frontal lobe. And embodiment practices, oh yes. Your mental fitness training. Yes, like these are the tools. And we all have very similar tools. The people who want to work with you are going to work with you.
Yeah. Well, and you were saying that, and I was like, as I'm listening to you guys talk, I'm like, we're all saying the same thing, right? Yeah. And it's always important when we work with people to ask, you know, how do you define this, or what do you mean by friend, or whatever, to just get very clear on, you know, because we're all saying the same thing. And yeah, and you talked about getting present with what is, and a big thing of my work and this work is not waiting till some other point in the future to be happy.
Exactly.
Or to feel love, to be loved, to know that you're loved, whatever. Oh, I'll be happy when that happens, when I finish graduate school, or when the kids are older, or when COVID is over. I'll be happy then.
It's like now is the only moment we have.
Yeah.
Now it's the ever evolving now. That's all there is be present here, right here. Because if you're not right here, then you're living in the past or you're living in the future and you're not here.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The now is all we have.
Mm-hmm.
It's not to say to go and just like blow your life savings on, you know, horse racing. Because I think that I think that there's a place to prepare for the future. You can think,
oh, sure, yeah, and
staying in the presence of presence is where connection lives, of intimacy lives, right? It's really, really important. It's like if you throw, like, that's where anxiety also lives. It's like where you throw your happiness or your things into the future, or your present into the future. That's where anxiety is created. So when we are able to just drop in and acknowledge that there is life happening right now, that we can be with each other. Like if I'm contemplating the past and I'm like hanging out at Dawn's house and we're having lunch and I haven't seen her in like 6 months, and I'm like sitting there and all I want to talk about is the past or the future, I'm actually not really there in intimacy with her. What's happening with us right now and the way that our bodies are relating, the way we're breathing together, the way that we're really connecting on like, that's like finding the sensation and the beauty and the love in that moment is so juicy. Yeah. So that was also, I just wanted to name that because I also had the young Trish in her exploration of spiritual growth really believed like these ideas of if you just breathe and be in the moment, that it'll all be okay. Well, I never planned for the future, and I was always just pleasure seeking. I was also just like really just flooding myself with affirmations that didn't feel truly true for me. And what that caused is this rift of a long time of literally creating a whole lot more stuff that I had to dig through. And that's why, like, there's a difference in just be present and really being with what is. And there's a difference of being embodied and bypassing to be just happy, right? And I think that it's so crucial to, like, I mean, things are going on, things are up in some people's lives. Pain happens, and you can still choose to be with it or separate from it.
Yeah.
You can still be happy in your pain.
Yeah. It is mind blowing. It really is, like, to go, I'm a daydreamer. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this. I want to do this. And I kind of live, or I have like lived way out there, and making that switch to go, I don't have all that stuff yet. But I can be content and happy now with all this stuff. There was a couple weeks ago, yesterday even, where I didn't really feel joyful. I was kind of down, and I was like, and I can still love me now and love life now. This is not the thing that I want to be feeling, but it's here. And if I just pretend it's not here, well, that doesn't work because it's here. And I can still be happy now, even though this is here. Right. And as we play, right, there's a spectrum. I talk about joy, and there's a spectrum of joy. There's the exuberant, like, you know, throw the party hats. And then there's content.
Yes.
And for me, that's the spectrum of joy that when I talk on that. Right. And we can be on that. So there can still be contentment now with what is.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
I'm so appreciating this conversation and the perspectives in this room. Thank you both for being such powerful leaders, such powerful women, and really doing the work on yourselves to transform you to show up differently in the world so that you can support others.
Yeah.
Thank you to Love Coach Academy for being our muse, as always, and being a really powerful force in the world. And thank you to Sign Network for really sharing us out on 35 pages and, you know, really sharing our work and sharing the work of our beautiful guest, Kimberly Lindsay, today. Thank you so much, Kimberly, for really just like diving in, being radically honest, and, you know, holding with us in this, you know, in this conversation, because the conversations that we have, Dawn and I think, run a slightly different show where it's very, very honest and very vulnerable that we share on this show. And you are like, I got this.
Yeah.
So much for all your pre-work too. Dawn, I always thank you.
I thank you for having me here and for the work that you all do. And it is true what you just said. I mean, I've watched several of your shows, and it is vulnerable and it's honest. And that's the only way that we're all going to make the shifts, right? I envision a world where our children don't have to heal from, I mean, we're all going to have stuff, right? But that we're raising a vibration of people in the planet, and they're not healing from their childhoods, right?
Right. How powerful and profound that is.
Yeah.
Yes. I stand in solidarity with you with that, because how different lives can be if we don't have to go back through and heal traumatic curriculum from childhoods. Because I've spent my whole life doing that.
Yeah.
And so I'm grateful that I have, because that was always my spiritual path. That's been my spiritual curriculum. And I stand in solidarity with really believing that we can absolutely change our future generations' trajectory to really lean into like honoring their spiritual curriculum, and that they don't have to spend like decades of their life healing from traumatic childhoods.
Yeah.
Like, yes.
And what if they learn now how to fix this, how to do this work in their childhoods, right?
Yes.
They're going to have whatever their stuff is. But what if they get their whole lives and their whole childhoods to know how to deal with it in the moment when it's happening?
Yes.
Before it, right?
Yeah. How to navigate it, how to have self-love, how to have empathy, how to have understanding, you know, and really work what their patterns that are arising. Like, how much more advanced spiritually they will be to serve on the planet and really tap into their innate gifts because they're wide open and they're connected, right? In the loving. That's it. That's everything. So
Yeah.
I just want to honor you, Kimberly, for the work you've done in your life. And thank you. I really acknowledge, like, you have such a beautiful heart and beautiful mother, beautiful family. I'm just so proud of what your message you carry and the work you're doing in the world. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for saying yes to the show, and just keep up the good work, because you're spreading the light in a way that needs it. Like, you're really giving mothers, working mothers, moms, permission to shine as working mothers and be great mothers. Like, that's everything. Mothers need this in the world, and I just really so appreciate the angle of really explaining the saboteurs today, because everyone has it. We're all human. So really speak honestly about that. And yes, there's true tools to work the process with this, and such good medicine you bring. Thank you.
Yeah. And
And if
one last thing is 5 sage powers to living a joy-filled life. It's my free guide to anyone. Will get sent right to them from my newsletter.
Yeah.
and I have sent all of those links into the comment box. So if you're more Lindsay or Kimberly Lindsay, reach out to her via her website, www.loveandconflict.com. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
See you next Thursday.